Hey everyone, I'm Scott Branley.
And I'm Alicia Coakley. Every member of the church has a story to share, one that can instill faith, invite growth, and inspire others.
On today's episode, we're going to hear how one returned missionary's struggle with addiction led him to understand that the Savior never closes the door when we earnestly seek Him. Welcome to Latter-day Lights. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Latter-day Lights. We're so glad you're here with us today, and we're really excited to introduce our guest, Morgan Dastrup. Morgan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. It's a beautiful Sunday, and I'm very glad to be here.
Awesome.
Nice.
Well, we're happy to have you. I think it's so funny how this works out sometimes, right? Like if I remember correctly, I believe I put a post up on my Facebook page asking any of my friends if they had any guests that they thought would make, good guests for the podcast, things like that. Was it Daniel?
Devin.
Daniel Adams, one of our old guests and a friend of mine, reached out and was like, you should talk to Morgan. And then we find out when Morgan gets on here that Morgan is actually good friends with, is it your brother, sister? Who is it, Scott? Or somehow you guys are connected?
Yeah, so I have two of my best friends are his related, right? It's your sister-in-law? Your sister.
Sister-in-law.
It's your sister and your brother-in-law, right? Yeah.
So
we hung out at New Year's. I think it was New Year's or there was a party towards the end of the year last year that we all hung out together. So yeah, crazy.
Small world, I tell you. I love it though. I love whenever there's like all these connections. Oh, and then you said something about Devin, right? Devin's a friend of ours too. So I don't know. Anyway, there's just all these connections, and I just love it. I love how Heavenly Father gives us those little God winks, and He's like, "Hey, I see you. I know what you're doing."
Yeah.
Very cool.
So, Morgan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, my friend?
Well, I was born in a small farming community called Richfield, Utah, back in 1985, an 85 model. So I am the oldest of four boys.
Okay.
And every time I say that to people, my people always say, "Oh, your poor mother." And I always say, "Oh, no. For us," because, there were times that my mom, and I say this with all the love of the world because I love my mother to death, but she was able to handle us in a way that most people could not. My dad, he grew up in a very small farming town, not too far away from Richfield. There's a little town called Sigurd, Utah. My mom was born in Logan, Utah, grew up in Heber City. And then when my mom was 14, she and my dad met, and they've been inseparable ever since then. So.
Wow. That's young. Very cool. Well, where do you live now?
My wife and I, we just bought a house, and so we moved to Ogden, Utah, where we now currently reside. So it's just me, my wife, our dog Wilson, and my 12-year-old son who visits every other weekend. But now where it's summer, he can visit up to a week, 2 weeks. Really is up to him. So, but when he's in school, it's every other weekend and most of the holidays.
Awesome. Very cool. I miss Ogden. I would love to go back. So Texas is great, but Ogden is better.
Well, we don't have the humidity that you guys down in Texas have, so.
Yeah, and you have mountains. It's not flat. There's just lots of tops and flat land around here. So,
Yeah.
That's the thing I miss the most is just all the beautiful views of any direction in Ogden. I feel like you just turn around and you're like, yep, it's beautiful. So
it is.
Yeah. So I know you play the guitar because you played it when we had that party, and my mother-in-law just thought you were amazing. What else? Do you have any other hobbies or things you like to do?
Aside from being a self-taught guitar player, I am an avid Magic the Gathering card player.
Oh, okay.
So I got into that back in 2012 because I was roommates with a bunch of guys who played the game, who introduced me to the game, and I started playing, and I've been playing ever since. I didn't really get serious in starting my collection until after I got married to my current wife right now. And so I remember I was packing some things up, and my cards happened to be one of those things. My brother asked me, "How much money have you actually spent in this game?" And I say, "Well, I really don't know, but there's some cards that are worth lots of money, and I don't know exactly how much money I've spent.
Gosh.
So let's just leave it. Let's just say it's more than it really should be."
Oh my gosh.
That's your retirement plan.
Right.
No, there's no retirement plan at all.
That's kind of like me with makeup and stuff like that. My husband doesn't ask anymore. He doesn't ask how much anything is. Like, trust me, whatever's on my face is probably enough to pay our mortgage, throughout the year. It's just one of those things. I'm sorry, I don't have natural beauty. I have to plaster it off. Wow. Well, very cool. All right. Well, Mr. Morgan, we are looking forward to hearing your story. I know I got to hear a little bit of it, but Scott has no idea really what we're talking about. So we're going to go ahead and pass the time over to you and let you tell us, where does your story begin?
Well, I mean, really, my story, I guess if I could really point to a singular point, my story is just a conglomeration of other influences that drove me down the path that I've been on. I guess we have to really start with my mom, really. My mom, and I hope she don't kill me for telling her story, but it's really a story of her being having perseverance and trusting in the process that our Heavenly Father has put in place for us as part of His plan. So my mom, as I mentioned, she was born in Logan. She was number 5 of 8. My mom was born into a situation that most people would find rather appalling. Her biological parents were alcoholics, drug addicts. Her biological father was a drummer for Gladys Knight. And this was before Gladys Knight became Gladys Knight and the Pips. It was Gladys Knight and the Tones. And so he was on the road doing that, and of course her biological mom was at home trying to raise these kids, and she just turned to the bottle, turned to drugs, turned to other forms of coping.
Mm-hmm.
And so when my mom was probably around 2, maybe 3 years old, her biological mom said that she was going to go to the grocery store to get milk and some other things. She checked out and went down to Texas and didn't come back for a couple of years.
Wow.
Whoa.
And so while in the process of this, while her biological dad was on the road, I guess you could say my mom's biological grandmother on her paternal side called her biological father up and said, "Hey, the state's taking your kids. You need to get down here." And so he left the band, left his drums, left everything, bought a car, drove it till it broke down, and walked the rest of the way into the state of Utah. But by the time he got here, my mom and her siblings were already dispersed. They had all been put into foster homes and or adopted.
Wow.
And so my mom was adopted into a family who were to me my grandparents, but she was adopted into this family, and I can't really. As much as I joke around and I tease about my mom's adopted parents being not, shall we say, the best grandparents, but you know, find me a set of people who are the best at being parents or grandparents or whatever. Because granted, you're given the tools that you have, and you work with the best that you have. And so, but my mom was given a stable, albeit somewhat toxic situation, but she did the best she could in that situation. And so when she met my dad when she was 14 and she saw his situation, she said, "This is what I want, and this is how I want to raise my kids."
Aww.
And because my dad grew up in Mayberry, pretty much, where everybody knew who you were, everybody knew your business,
Yep.
and everybody, looked out for each other, more or less. And so when my mom saw his upbringing and saw how his parents and that dynamic worked, because my dad is the youngest of six. And so he was in that dynamic. And so she said, "This is how I want to do things." So I enter the world after my dad goes on a mission to the Philippines. They get married like 6 months after he gets home. I come into the world in 1985, and I mean, my life was pretty great. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better childhood. My brothers and I, we had it pretty good as far as normal childhoods are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to fast forward to when I was 10 years old, and I'll never forget this day. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was December 9th, 1995. My mom gets a phone call out of the blue, and it's her biological brother saying, "This is so-and-so. We've been looking for you."
Aww.
And my mom implodes. She just implodes. And because as far as my recollection is concerned, she wasn't really looking, but she had always had that question in the back of her mind,
Mm-hmm.
And but when she found her biological siblings and everything was starting to come out of the woodwork, like I said, she imploded. And she had to go to therapy to deal with these things.
Mm-hmm.
And so when, mom and dad say, "We're going to the grocery store," and, they don't come back with any groceries, you're 10, 11 years old and you're starting to, start to ask those questions, what's going on here? But the more I watched my mom go through that, and the more I saw her interact with her biological siblings along with her adopted family and watching that balancing act, it just really, you don't think about it when you're a kid, what kind of a trauma that would bring. But now that I'm a lot older and I see things in a different way, I am very appreciative that my mom chose not to allow that situation to destroy her. Or it uplifted her. It made her realize, I can have this family, and I need to make sure that I cultivate those relationships. And to her credit, she's done the best that she could. And so that was a really big thing for me. And so when I was going through school, and most kids who were in my position were picked on a lot in school. Now, when I was 5 years old, I was diagnosed with having attention deficit disorder, or ADD. And so when that diagnosis was first announced among kids of my generation, that was not a lot of information was prevalent about how to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just a matter of, my mom said, you can do it. You can just push through it. You can do it. And she went to bat for me a lot. She went to the schools every day. She went and fought the principals every day. And it was like clockwork. They could just set their watch to it and say, okay, here comes Mrs. Dastrup. What kind of hell is she going to raise? But I always had a thirst for knowledge and learning. But as I went into junior high school and high school, I just noticed that it wasn't so much that I was not interested in learning. It was, I was bored. I was really bored, and I was not challenged enough. But it was people trying to fit the round peg in the square hole.
Right.
And people like myself who don't think in those terms, we were just seen as, we don't have time for people like yourself, so we're going to put you over here and let other kids get pushed through.
Right.
Which kind of made a person like myself feel a little ostracized and a little not wanted, I guess is the best way to say it. And so, but I had to learn really quickly. I have to make a choice and fight for myself a little bit. And so that's why I dropped out of high school my junior year. So I did not graduate high school. I do not have a college education. I do not have any certificates or anything like that. That might change in the future. At least that's what my wife is hoping for. And I'm hoping that for myself. But I became a voracious reader. I started reading anything I could get my hands on. And as part of that, I had to come to a decision when I was 18 years old. Do I really know if the church is true? Do I really know if Joseph Smith is a prophet? Do I really know if the Book of Mormon is what it says to be? And so I had these questions in mind, and on my very last youth conference, we went to Martin's Cove, Wyoming. Now, just to give you a little historical background on that, Martin's Cove is where the Martin and Willie Hancock companies were on their way from Nebraska, but they left late in the season.
Right.
Even though they were warned not to. But the fire and the zeal to get to Zion was so strong in them that they just went anyway. So they got to Martin's Cove in October 1856, and the things that they had to endure were beyond what we cushy people would not want to go through, because we have it so good. But I had these questions in mind, and I remember the third day we were there, we went to go into the cove itself. And I'm walking through, they let us into the cove, one by one, just so that there would not be any distractions, so that the spirit would not be unimpeded. And so I went in there and I started asking, Heavenly Father, was it worth the sacrifice? Was it worth all this? What is Joseph Smith really the guy that you called? Is the Book of Mormon really the book that it says it is? But then I asked this next question, and it was not the question that I originally had. should I serve a mission? And I won't go into detail because that's a very sacred. It was a very sacred experience that I had there. But suffice it to say that when I came out of the cove, I was still wrestling with those questions. And then that night, I couldn't sleep. I was tossing and turning in my sleeping bag. And so I got up, and they had these hewn log benches sitting around a fire pit, and the fire was still going. I guess someone forgot to put out the fire that night. But I'm sitting there and I'm just having these thoughts run through my mind. And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to put out this fire and just, go to bed. So I put out the fire and make sure that all the embers are out. But I just happened to find myself laying back on those hewn logs. And if you've ever been out on the prairie in Wyoming on a cool summer night, you're looking up at the stars. The vaulted heavens are before you. And it's a very humbling experience. And then that's when the confirmations started to come. And it was not like, yes, this, yes, that, yes, that. It was more like, Morgan, you already know these things are true. So go and do. And so shortly after I get home from my youth conference, I go to my bishop and I say, I want to start filling out the papers. But here's the catch. Every roadblock was in my way trying to do that. And it seemed like no matter what I did, no matter what I tried to do, it was not coming to me. Other guys my age who I was in the same priest quorum with, they were getting their mission papers filled in, sent out, and getting their calls, but I wasn't getting mine. And so my parents, we moved out of that ward, moved into the ward that my parents are in now. I walk up to the bishop and I tell him, I'm ready to serve a mission. I want to start filling out my papers. And he's like, okay, let's get it filled out. Let's get it going. I'm like, well, if I would have thought it would have been that easy, I would have done it a long time ago. But the part that I didn't tell you is that the bishop in the previous ward was just having me do all these things, make me jump through every hoop. And every hoop I jumped through, he would set up another one. I would jump through that one. He would set up another one. So when I say roadblocks, that's what I mean.
Gotcha.
And then all of a sudden, no more roadblocks. I get my mission paper sent in, and I would dare say it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, I get my mission call. And by this time, I had already turned 19, and I get my mission call back, and I've been called to go to the Washington, D.C. South Mission. And yeah, I was like, okay, here we go. We're ready to go. But I was like, well, what's in Washington, D.C. that would make me want to go there in the first place? Because I kept hearing, oh, that's the murder capital of the world. You're gonna be in the ghettos. You're gonna be gonna be dealing with all the gangs, all the violence, all the drugs, and all that stuff. And I'm like, good golly, do I really want to? But I had that confirmation. I was not about to turn back on that confirmation. And so I get the letter from the mission president. I write him back saying, I'm coming. I'm on my way. So I get to the MTC and I thrived in the MTC. I had a blast. 3 weeks in the MTC to learn what you needed to learn. And I was on the plane on my way. And then I get to DC and I'm like, the Lord knew what he was doing because I love history. I study history. I study history as a hobby. The Civil War is a big, big subject for me. And where was the Civil War fought? In Virginia.
Mhm.
And, along with that, I got to meet people from all walks of life, from all over the world. I met people from 93 different countries from all over the world.
Wow.
And you want to talk, people talk about the culture shock and all that of being a missionary, missionaries going to foreign countries and having a culture shock. Well, the culture shock for me was I'm just this ignorant, snot-nosed kid from backwoods Utah. I go to the seat of power that the free world is at, and I'm meeting people from, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Japan. You name it. If you name the country, I probably could say, yeah, I met people from there.
Wow.
But along with that, I met ambassadors, diplomats, congressmen, congresswomen, senators. I met the gambit. But the best part about my mission was I got to go serve in the countryside of Northern Virginia. And I got to meet some salt of the earth people.
Wow.
And that was something that I needed because it opened up my eyes because I saw these people living in situations where their homes could fit inside my kitchen.
Wow.
They had no running water, no indoor plumbing to speak of, but they had electricity, flat screen TVs, and dish so they could watch NASCAR. But in all honesty, though, they had what they needed. And that was what I needed to see. Because when you think of America, you think, we are a very prosperous, very forward-moving country. We are a very rich, abundant country, and of which we are. But then you see these people living like they have been living for the past 200, 300 plus years. And talk about an opportunity for me to appreciate the things that I have even more. And I could not have asked for a better time. It was a difficult 2 years, don't get me wrong, because you go from meeting salt of the earth people who are thirsting, hungering for something that is otherwise outside of their reach. And then you go to the most affluent zip codes in the nation, where you could see DC across the river. And I met people who rake in incomes at least $500,000 a year, if not more. And there they say, I have everything I need. What more could you offer me? You're just a 19-year-old, 20-year-old snot-nosed kid. What do you know about life? Well, obviously you got me there. I don't know anything about life. But what I do know is this, and this is the answer to a lot of problems that you might be having. And if I could have stayed there, I would have. I would still be there to this day if I could have had that chance. Because what the mission gave me was structure. And thank God I had the mission president I had. And because he was the former director of the FBI in Los Angeles.
Wow.
He was the personal bodyguard to 3 presidents of the church. And while he was on assignment with President Gordon B. Hinckley, that's when President Hinckley gave him the assignment to be the mission president of the Washington, D.C. South Mission.
Wow.
So I came at a very, very critical time because he gave me structure. He gave me purpose. And as a kid who has ADD, we need structure. We need to get up at a certain time. We need to do things at a certain time. And it was regimented, and I thrived in that environment. But all good things must come to an end. I come home. What's a kid to do? So I went right to work. I I tried to get my GED numerous times, and that little voice in the back of your head always said, you're not good enough for this. You're not smart enough for that. And the devil played its tune over and over again. And so I just decided I'm just going to stick to with what I know. And that is read, read, read.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's funny whenever I tell people that I did not graduate high school, the classic come up is, well, you don't sound uneducated. Like, well, what that's supposed to mean? How am I supposed to sound to you?
Yeah.
But it's because I chose to sit down and read books that actually mattered.
Mm.
And I have a person to thank for that. And her name is Christine Brinkhurst. She's no longer with us now, but she was my English teacher when I was in 8th grade. And she taught me how to read William Shakespeare in the Old English and enunciate and dictate perfectly. And
Wow.
so she taught me how. It was not so much the reading or the phonetic part. It was read with purpose and meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Let the book take you where you want to go.
Right.
And so because of her, I have read all of Shakespeare's completed works. I've read Plato, Socrates, Dante. I mean, you name it, I've probably read it.
Wow.
And my wife will tell you, to this day, if I'm not out busy doing something like working in the yard or doing something, I have my nose in a book. Now, obviously, right now, all my books are packed away because we haven't got unpacked those yet. But reading was an escape. And so when I just started working and reading. But then I decided, I think it's time that I need to start settling down a little bit. I need to get married. I need to, bring that chapter of my life into full focus.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's not a lot of pickings when you're not in college, or you don't have a high school diploma or a college degree or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a blue collar working guy. I work when the sun comes up. And so I decided to go do the online dating thing. Now I can obviously tell that was a disaster in the making, but hindsight's 2020. And so I meet this gal from Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm not going to mention names because I believe in protecting the innocence of their names. So we meet, and instant head over heels. Well, we get into, it was a whirlwind romance.
Mm-hmm.
And with those come problems. And the first problems that arose were things that should not have happened. Well, being the honorable person that I am, that I was raised to be, I go to the bishop to tell him what's going on, and I had to go through a bishop's court.
Mm-hmm.
Disciplinary action. And I tell her that we can't get married until this is resolved. She said, well, how long will that take? I said, about a year, if not more. Out. She's gone.
Mm.
And we were engaged. And so she took the ring. She took other things. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to let that deter me. So I wait a couple of months till, lick the wounds a little bit, let the salt get out of the wound. Then I get online again. If, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Mm-hmm.
I meet my ex-wife on there. And we date for about 6 months, a little bit longer. We get married April 24th, 2009. Get married in the temple, everything at least in my mind, was going great.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started seeing, I mean, obviously in myself, that I was not completely happy with how things were going. And obviously, if I wasn't happy, she sure was not, because, you know, it takes two. There was not a lot of communication going on. And where there's no communication, you're not feeling validation. You're not knowing where you stand with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to turn to alternative means of validation, which led me to pornography. And I mean, you would think that me reading would be an escape. Well, I still read, but I had kind of put away the books for a little while, because I found that pornography stimulated something up in here that was fulfilling a need.
Yeah.
Now, pornography is is highly addictive drug, and people don't, in today's society, people don't look at pornography as a drug, because when you think of drugs, you think of heroin, meth, alcohol, marijuana, and fentanyl, and all those things, of which they are a drug. But the high that I was getting, the dopamine and the serotonin that was coursing through my veins, gave me the sense of, oh, I feel good. But the catch to those addictions is that later on, the high falls away, and you're left feeling down in the dumps again. And I hid it from my ex for a while, and then things started to take a turn. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail, because that's a chapter of my life that I have closed. But suffice it to say that abuse was running rampant in the marriage, verbally, emotionally, mentally, and at times physically.
Yeah.
And that is something that I would never wish on anyone, but it happened. And so we own it, we see it for what it is, and we deal with it. And so we find out, and and this is a time I'll never forget either. In July, I believe it was the end of July, beginning of August, we find out we're pregnant. Now I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is a fresh start. I'm about to become a dad. This is a big deal, and any person who will tell you being a parent is a big deal. It's a very scary deal.
Yeah.
And I decided to put the pornography away, because I did not realize that I had already become addicted. But again, it's that hindsight deal. You don't think about it until it's right here in the face. And so I decided, okay, got to put that away. Big deal is changes are coming. So by mid-August, by mid-August, we go to the hospital, and I hear the heartbeat for the very first time. And that sharp focus came into play. And so that made it very real, very, very real. But at the same time, I was not feeling emotionally validated, and I was still seeking pornography to fill that void. And then my ex decides to head up. My ex and I, we were living in St. George at the time. So she decided that she needed to go see her mom for a little bit. And I thought, no problem. Go see your mom. You and your mom need to connect on this. A daughter needs her mom, because she's going to, be a mom. and she needs to have that connection there. So I thought, no problem, go ahead. And this was over Labor Day weekend. Sunday morning, I get a phone call from my ex asking if she could stay an extra day. And I thought to myself, what harm could it do? So I said, sure, babe, stay an extra day. I'm sure you and your mom could use that time to connect. So I ended up staying at my parents' place. I go back to my apartment, our apartment, the next day, that evening actually, because I had to work that day. And I think I'm robbed. The TV is gone. The DVD player is gone. A lot of stuff is gone. And when you're in that mode of, oh my gosh, I've been robbed, you don't really process quite right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking. I'm like, so I'm on the phone. I'm calling her, but it's going straight to voicemail. I must have called her at least 12 times, all straight to voicemail. And while I'm on the phone calling her for the 13th time, I guess 13 is a magic number, I look on the bookcase, and there sits an envelope with my name on it.
Oh.
And I knew immediately. My heart sank. I grab it, I open it, and it's listing the reasons why she's leaving and what she took.
Wow. So can I ask real quick? Because and obviously you don't have to give us all the details or anything, but were you guys still going to church and stuff when all of this was going on? Had you kind of? Wow.
No, we were going to church. We were going to a young married couples ward,
mm-hmm.
and we were going to the temple as well. And that's the crutch of the whole thing is, people will always put on a facade of, that, like, even if there's turmoil at home,
mm-hmm.
they don't want that to show in public. So I can't speak for her, obviously, but for myself, I put on this facade of everything is happy, everything is great, everything is fine. I'm going to be a dad, huzzah.
Yeah.
But really, things had fallen apart long before she left.
Wow.
And so when I saw that letter and I read it, that's when everything went black for me. And my mom will tell you, I was a broken man. It was just everything that I could do just to get up in the morning and just function. If functioning was functioning like a zombie, if that's what
mm-hmm.
it means. And that part of my life is very blurred because there was I still to this day get moments of clarity as to what happened during that time, but I was pretty much non-existent mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually. I was not present. I was
mm-hmm.
present physically, but everything else I had checked out. And so I had moved back in with my parents, and I'm not even there, not even a week. There's a knock on the door. And I open the door, and there stands constable serving me a protection order.
Mm.
And,
Really?
and my mom is standing behind me, and she's like, "What is this crap?" And so she and I, in front of the constable, start reading this thing. And my mom is livid. She is lit. She is ready to throw down.
Mm-hmm.
And Alicia, you're a mom. I'm sure you would
mm-hmm.
you can sympathize with that.
Yep.
And so she obviously the list of reasons why that protection order was being served, obviously were bogus. Obviously, because she felt like I was going to go up there and exact revenge and violence. I'm not a violent man by nature, but if I'm pushed into a corner, I will come out swinging and do what I need to do. But I'm not going to go out of my way just to inflict harm or bodily harm on another person. That's not who I am. Because I was raised by parents who said, you never start the fight. You finish it. And so I had to go to court. And luckily, thank heavens, we had a lawyer in my mom and dad's ward who said, I will take on your case. I will, and he was a divorce lawyer as well. So I already had that guy in my corner. He said, what we need to do is get affidavits from people who witnessed things in case she comes down and wants to fight it. He said, I don't think she's going to fight. So we go to court. Guess who doesn't show up? The judge looks at me and says, Mr. Dastrup, I'm sorry that we wasted your time today. Case dismissed with prejudice. Be on your way. And that started the process of me, feeling anger, feeling resentment, feeling emotions I had no idea existed. And so with that, trying to, talk to her and, she's giving me updates on the pregnancy, which I was not a part of. I did not get to be a part of the emotional bonding that happens with a pregnancy. Right. And so I don't exactly remember the day that I filed for divorce, but I remember that after I walked out of my lawyer's office, I called her up and said, we've run our course. We're done. I'm filing for divorce. And let's just end things. Because obviously, you're not coming back here. I'm not going back up there. We can't meet in the middle at all. Then so while we're in the middle of the proceedings, March 2012 rolls around. I get a phone call at 1 o'clock in the morning by my ex-mother-in-law saying that my ex-wife had gone into labor and you better get up here. Done. I'm there. I pack a bag. I get in my dad's car and I drove all night. I did not stop. I did not do anything. I get to the valley. I get to Salt Lake. I just get into Draper. I call my mom because my parents had come up to Ogden to visit her sister, her biological sister who lives here in Ogden. And I said, my ex, she has gone into labor. And after I had got done with that phone call, I got a picture. My son had arrived.
Wow.
And so my mom and dad meet me at the hospital. And as soon as we walk in the door, we're greeted by a social caseworker. And you want to talk about a mom who's, again, riled up, lit, and livid. That was the case. But I'm going to spare the details of negative emotions. I remember sitting in the room. They wheel in my son, and I remember holding him in my arms. I mean, his head fit here, his butt fit here. And I just remember holding him like this, and supporting him with my other arm. But I just remember looking down, and my mom took a picture. But I'm looking at this kid, and I'm thinking to myself, what in the hell am I doing? I'm sure that's a natural reaction for most parents.
Yeah.
But for me, this one was different. Because I'm looking at him, and in the back of my mind, I'm saying to myself, you have no business raising this kid, being in the position that you're in. What are you going to do about it?
Wow.
Well, obviously, I could not answer that question. because I was still in the throes of addiction. No matter what my parents did, I still found a wraparound to get what I needed. And I had left a wave of destruction in my wake because of this addiction. Every person that I had talked to, met, tried to have a relationship with, they were destroyed. And so I'm like, well, I'm not about to destroy this one, because this one will have eternal, lasting impact. And so I leave the hospital that day, and I'm still trying to figure out, what the heck am I going to do? I have no idea how I'm going to get over this, get through this. So because I'm stressed out, I'm anxious and out of my mind, there's the addiction. It's there. I was triggered. So there, fulfill that need. So a few months later, I remember, and this is a very clear day for me. I remember I'm in the shower. I get out of the shower, getting ready for the day. I'm shaving, and I happen to look at myself in the mirror. And this is a behavior that I would tell anybody to look out for. Addicts will never look at themselves in the mirror. They never will, because they don't want to see who or what they have become, because it's a reflection of who they really are.
Right.
And so, but for some reason, I'm looking at myself in the mirror, making sure I don't cut myself shaving. But for some reason, the gaze would not let me go. And that's when I came to the realization I had no idea who I was. I had zero recollection as to who I was. And I like to think that I know my own mind. I like to think I know who I am pretty well. I mean, we all like to think that in some form or fashion. But the realization came that I had zero idea who I was. And that scared me. I mean, it scared me so bad that I remember literally dropping the razor in the sink. And I had to grab the sides of the sink, and I'm physically shaking because I'm so scared. And so after a couple of days of dealing with that emotion, I had to go talk to my bishop. Now, by this point, I had gone back to the young single adult ward. I was 27 when all this was starting to go down. Now, if you want to talk about a recall stamp being put right here, back at the young single adult ward, that will do it for you.
Yeah.
But luckily, I had a bishop that was very understanding. And so we sat down, and I started talking to him, and I told him, well, I vomited pretty much on his desk. Everything that was going on. He sat back, and he's like, well, Brother Dastrup, what are we going to do about it? I said, I honestly don't know. I don't know what to do. So he pulls out a piece of paper, and it has addresses and times on it. I'm like, Bishop, what's this? He's like, these are addresses and times for the church's 12-step program. Along with that, Brother Dastrup, I want you to go get help. I want you to go to therapy. I'm like, Bishop, the last thing I need to do is tell a guy, my problems when he can't even relate to my problems. The classic addict notation. You possibly can't understand what I'm going through because you're not going through it. Well, that was obviously a lie. Excuse me. But he said, I will help pay for your first couple of sessions. And then after that, you just tell him how much you can pay, and we'll take care of everything else. I sat on that piece of paper for days, weeks, because I could not bring myself to say that I needed to go here because it was frightening to me. Because I thought to myself, when the first thing that came to my mind was 12-step program. That isn't that for Alcoholics Anonymous? Isn't that for people who do drugs?
Right.
I'm not doing any drugs, or so I thought at the time. But luckily my parents, especially my dad at this time, the intuition of a parent still scares me even to this day. My dad said, "What do you have to lose? If you go, you go. And if you don't get anything from it, you don't get anything from it. You just go to a different one that will fit you." And so I was like, "Dang it, Dad, way to be logical. Why do you have to be logical? Why do you have to do that?" And so I decided to go. And I remember it was on a Sunday night. I went into the seminary building at a high school in St. George. And I'm sitting there, arms folded, very closed off. I'm looking around, I'm seeing these guys. I'm like, man, there's no way these guys are as bad off as I am. There's no possible way. And boy, did reality hit me in the face that night. I mean, it hit me so hard that I was stunned into silence that night. And so the moderator was sitting at the head of the room, and it went around. And I'm hearing these stories of these guys. Some are younger than me. Some are older than me. Some are divorced. Some are still married and, trying to patch things up. And then it got to my turn. What do I say? But what's crazy about that is I found myself talking about what was going on. And back in my mind, I'm like, Morty, shut up. You don't know these guys. What are you doing? These are complete strangers. They're going to judge you. So shut up. Stop talking. But I couldn't stop talking. And then all of a sudden, I stopped talking and it moved on. And so I'm sitting there. I'm thinking to myself, what just happened? What the heck was that all about? But at the same time, it was liberating. And anybody who tells you when they go to a 12-step program meeting, it's frightening because you're being. I like to describe it as walking into the cafeteria butt naked for all the world to see. Now, obviously, that's metaphorical, but still, it's that feeling of insecurity. You're like, what am I doing? Why am I talking? Because you're bearing your soul out. You're getting things out. You're spewing it. But I was like, okay, that was just one meeting. But I kept finding myself going back. It was like the Spirit of the Lord was dragging me, kicking and screaming to these meetings and kicking and screaming to my therapy sessions. And thank heavens I had the therapist I had, because he was able to connect with me in such a way that all he did was say, go, and sit back and just listen. And that's something that I needed at that time. I needed someone to just listen. And I was doing that on and off for about 3 to 4 years. And that was a very hard time, very therapeutic time. So I'm still going to church. I hadn't gone to the temple yet because I felt like I wasn't ready for that. I felt like I wasn't worthy for that. But while I'm going to the Young Single Adult Ward, I met a girl, and this girl saved my life, and I owe her everything for this because she taught me how to come out and trust again.
Mm.
And I'm not going to mention her name, but I owe her everything. I mean, literally everything. We were together for 2 years.
Wow.
And because we met in St. George and we ended up working together at a clothing store in St. George. And then she decided to move up to Salt Lake, and I chased after her. But that was a blessing in disguise as well, because it gave me the opportunity to be closer to my son, who was in diapers at the time. He was probably 1, maybe 2 years old at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that I needed to happen. But again, when you leave your safety net, when you leave your support system, and you try to go and venture out on your own, you start to feel those old demons come back again.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to square that as much as I possibly could. But old habits, as they say, die hard.
Yeah.
And the relationship that I had with this girl, it fell apart. And we were engaged as well. And so it just got to a point where I was using manipulation to get what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
I was not exactly, shall we say, the best person to be around during that time. And I own that. I take full responsibility for that. And so I was living with her best friend and her husband at the time. And so she gave me back the ring. We broke it off. And I had to find another place to be. And that's when the downward spiral of my depression really started taking hold. I know I had relapsed a few times, and I did not know where there was a support group up in Salt Lake at where I was living at the time. And so I know I relapsed. But again, that's part of my life that's very fuzzy. I don't have full memory recall of that part of my life because of everything that was going on.
Yeah.
But I know I relapsed. That part I do know. And so I'm working at a factory down in Midvale, of all places. I'm commuting from downtown Salt Lake to Midvale.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad gives me a call and says, I'm coming up to visit just to see how you're doing. Well, he gets there. He sees how I'm doing. He gets on the phone with my mom and says, I'm bringing him home.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to come home. And my mom's like, no, don't bring him home. I don't need that here. I don't need that. I don't need that stress here.
Mm-hmm.
But my dad's like, he needs to come home. He's in a very, very bad way.
Wow.
So my dad helps me pack up my truck, pack some stuff in his car. Back to St. George we go. And I'm in communication with my ex at this time, telling her what's going on. And so by that point, we had started doing the every other weekend deal. And thank heavens for my dad's intuition to bring me home. Because it was there that I started back on the track again. I started going back to therapy. I started going back to the 12-step program. And started going back to the temple. Started going back to church. Because it was there during those times that, you know, you think to yourself, I'm alone in this. I feel alone. I don't know who to count on, but my Heavenly Father was looking out for me. He put people in my path. The girl that I dated for 2 years was one of those people. He put her in my path to show me, hey, I'm looking out for you. And then I was going to another therapist and going back to the 12-step. And this therapist's name, and I got to say his name because it's funny. His name was Dr. Phil. And so when my bishop told me about him, I was like, "Are you kidding me? That can't be right." Sure enough, there's his business card, Dr. Phil. And so he was another one of those therapists that just talk. And I talked probably more than I really should have. But when you're in that frame of mind, you really, you're just a word vomit machine. You're just getting everything out. And I'm glad that happened, because that was Heavenly Father's way of saying, okay, it's time to let go. Let it go. Not to bring up Frozen, but that's the only thing that comes to mind. I hate that movie, but whatever. And so, again, I started dating again. And my dad, again, to his credit, he sat me down one day and said, you need to stop dating and just learn to love you.
Yeah.
Because how can you love someone if you don't love yourself?
Right.
I'm like, thanks, Dad. way to kill my groove here, Dad. But he was right. He was absolutely right. I needed to figure this out before I could figure everything else out. And while I was doing that, I was being a dad. I was able to, get my son every other weekend. We make, my ex-wife and I, we co-parent. We were able to get that figured out and make it work. I mean, it wasn't always easy, because I remember one day my ex was feeling rather salty toward me. For what? I don't know. But this is where I learned to really stand up for myself. And I looked her in the eye one day. I said, look, I don't care how you feel about me. What happened to us in the past is in the past. But you will give me the respect that is mine, because I am his father. And I am a person of worth, and someone who is worth loving. If you can't jive with that, that's on you. And after I got back in my truck, I played that back again. I was like, wow, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Because I had never, ever said that about myself to anybody. But then I realized therapy is working, because I could say what I need to say and not feel guilty about it. And talk about a liberating feeling, because now I am able to speak and actually be okay with it.
Yeah.
And while I'm going through this process, Heavenly Father is putting things in my way. And I started reading again. I started to read books, not necessarily I don't like to call them self-help books, but just for hyperbole, that's what they were. One book came to mind. Right. One book that came in my way it was called Wild at Heart by Pastor John Eldridge. And this book gave me, and I hate to use the term that this book gave me permission, but it really did. It gave me permission to be a man again. It taught me that God created men and women for specific roles. And the man's role in this world is to be a hunter, a gatherer, a provider, and to be a violent creature. Now, I know that term sounds obtuse, but I'll explain that. Men are inherently violent creatures. And we need to move. We need to express our bodily function in a very violent manner. That's why we roughhouse. That's why we wrestle. That's why we fight. Because that's what we do. That's our makeup. That's how God created us. But society will tell you that boys don't need to do that. They should do that. They should fit square box, round hole.
Mm-hmm.
And boys are not designed to be that way. And so, and that is a book that I would highly recommend to any, male, female. That is a book I highly recommend. Get Wild at Heart by John Eldridge. And it gave me permission to be, okay, I'm a man. I can be this because that's how God designed me. Another book that came into my life was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a fantastic read for anybody. I highly recommend that book because it gave me a perspective that basically says that we could choose to be happy or we could choose to be angry.
Right.
This coming from a guy who survived Auschwitz.
Yes.
I mean, of all the places in the world to find God is Auschwitz.
Yeah.
I mean, you kidding me? But that was one of those books that really came into stark focus in my life. And while I'm reading this one, I'm reading the scriptures as well. And at the same time, I'm reading another book by Jeffrey R. Holland called For Times of Trouble. And in the back of the book, on the back cover, was a DVD of a fireside that he had hosted. So I'm like, I need something to watch, so let's watch it. I like Holland. I like some of the stuff he has to say. Little did I know, I grabbed a pen and notebook, and I'm taking notes on everything that he's saying. And then he says something that has forever stuck with me. He's talking to a young lady, and she told him a little bit of her story, that she had been dealing with some things in life that were very, existentially, critical. And Elder Holland looks at her, and in his eloquent way that President Holland has, he says that man's extremity is God's opportunity. So I literally, after he said that, I stopped writing. I sat back and paused the video, and I thought on that over and over and over again. Man's extremity is God's opportunity. And then that aha moment happened, where the Spirit basically said, that addiction thing you've been dealing with, that's God's opportunity to teach you a lesson.
Yeah.
And I remember I started sobbing. And I get emotional still thinking about it to this day, because I had been through so much extremity at that time. And I kept saying, oh, woe is me. Why me? Why is this happening to me? Why did I have to deal with a divorce? Why did I have to deal with abuse? Why this? Why that? Why? Then it led me, and I got my scriptures here. It led me to read in Job. Because we read, because Joseph Smith asked the same question while he was in Liberty Jail.
Yeah.
How long? Why? Why is this happening? in that sweet answer that only our Heavenly Father could give. And I've committed this one to memory because this one has shaped my life as well. He said, "My son, peace be unto thy soul. Thine afflictions and thine adversity shall be but a small moment. And if thou endure well, God shall exalt thee on high. Thy friends do stand by thee, and they shall hail thee again with warm hearts and friendly hands." It's the next line that says, "Thou art not yet as Job."
Mm.
And so I grabbed my scriptures immediately, and I kind of had an idea of what Job was all about, but I didn't really know. And so I go to Job chapter 40, verses 7 through 10, and they read, "Gird up thy loins now like a man, I will demand of thee, and declare thou unto me. Wilt thou also disannul my judgment? Wilt thou condemn me, that thou mayest be righteous? Hast thou an arm like God? Or canst thou thunder with a voice like him?" It's this last verse that was the gut punch for me. "Deck thyself now with majesty and excellency, and array thyself with glory and beauty." Like, laid it on a little bit thick there, Heavenly Father. Okay, I see what you're doing here. And then that next verse led me to read what was going on in Jonah. So we all know the story of Jonah. He goes to Nineveh. He's called to go to Nineveh. He's like, hey, no, I'm going this way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously he gets thrown, into the sea, swallowed up by the fish. Goes to Nineveh. Nineveh repents. But it's the last part that we don't talk about. So we see Jonah sitting on a side of a hill under a lean-to, and the sun is beating down on his bald head. And he's looking at Nineveh, waiting for Nineveh to be destroyed by God. And God comes down and says, "Jonah, what the heck, dude? What are you so mad about? They did as you asked. They did as I commanded you." And Jonah's like, "Man, but I want you to destroy the city. You said you would." He's like, "Well, should I not have spared Nineveh?" And the "should I have not spared Nineveh" part is what really drove the point home. Because I had thought that there's no reason why I should be spared. But God asked the question, and I put my name in there. Should I not have spared Morgan?
Wow.
And yeah, wow is exactly right. And so, but then that started having me go and read the Psalms. And I'm still in the middle of studying the Psalms, but the Psalms have become a thing of solace for me. And thank heavens to this. I mean, when you read the Psalms, you think to yourself, "Man, David, stop. Yeah, you messed up. You messed up pretty bad. Bathsheba and standing on the rooftop and sending her husband out to the front line. Yeah, you pretty messed up, dude. But stop feeling. Own it. Move forward. So why are you feeling so down on yourself?" But I had that mindset. But I did not realize that the Psalms was David's way of paying penance, saying, "God, I know what I did was wrong. I am a wretched man. Accept my offerings of repentance." And that's when I was like, okay, God, can you accept me for where I am now? And thank heavens he has accepted me. Then enter stage left, my current wife. Because by this point, I had been going to the mid-single adult ward for ages 31 to 45. Mm-hmm. I had aged out of the YSA ward. And I had been going there for 3 years, and we had known about each other. And then one day, it was my birthday, and for me, my birthday is just another day. Another year old would be whatever. But she wished me a happy birthday to my face. And I thought, big deal, big. But as she's walking away, that little voice in the back of my head said, go talk to her. Go ask her out. I'm like, no, I've been there, done that. I don't want to do that again. Go talk to her. I'm like, oh, fine. So I asked her out talked to her and asked her out on a date. And much to my surprise, she said yes. But again, it's just when you're in a position where the Spirit will work with you, great things come about.
Right.
And I can say, thankfully to this day, I've been sober. I have a great relationship with my parents. I have a great relationship with my wife. Has been a bed of roses? No. But it's been worth it. But most importantly, I have an awesome relationship with my Heavenly Father and with myself. Because I can be able to look at myself in the mirror and go, you got some things to work on, but you're okay. You're not as bad off as you think you are.
Yeah.
You're okay.
Wow.
So I guess that's my story, really. I mean, the rest of the chapters are not yet written. So as is with everybody else's life, chapters are not yet written. So.
Wow. Man, that is like a roller coaster. I think about it and I think about like how many times just in my own life where I've gotten down on the things that I just can't seem to get through. You know what I mean? Like I just can't seem to put this addiction away, or I can't seem to get this, this thing right in my life. I just keep messing it up over and over again. And it gets so exhausting, And so I'm curious, like how do you keep going? Like how you said, like you're at a point where you feel good right now, but you also know that you still have some things that you're trying to work through and you still want to grow and you still want to progress. So how do you, I guess, keep the faith in those times when you're just like, oh, I did it again, or I can't get this right?
Well, for me, I always go back. Another great book that came into my life was 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos by Dr. Jordan B. Peterson.
Oh.
And that book really was a paradigm shift for me, because in that book, he talks about, when Jesus tells, his disciples to take up their cross and follow me.
Mm-hmm.
We always think about, carry the cross, I'm walking through. But no, it's a lot deeper than that. When Christ tells us to pick up our cross and follow him, and the next verse after that is, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. But here's the thing, and this is what helps me maintain the faith. Jesus will not take the problem away from you, but he will help you carry you through the problem. He's not going to take it away, because you need that as a learning experience.
Mm.
But he will help you carry that load even when you feel like you're going through it by yourself. And another reason and another part of how I've been able to keep the faith, how I've been able to keep moving forward, is I have surrounded myself with people who will hold me accountable.
Mm.
My wife, a great example of a person who will hold me accountable. My parents hold me accountable. My brothers hold me accountable. My sister-in-laws hold me accountable. My friends, Devin being one of those guys, will hold me accountable when I need it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I have to hold myself accountable. Because if I don't, then I will fall back into old habits. And I've ridden that roller coaster. I've got the T-shirt. I'm done with that back. It's boring. But back to your point, it is exhausting. it is exhausting because we as human beings do not like change. We despise change. We like to have things thus and so. And if anything disrupts that thus and so, chaos ensues. And we don't, but unless we are given the tools and accept, okay, change comes. So how can I use this change to the most and the best to my advantage? And the way I've been able to use change to my advantage, and I still struggle with change. I am, again, an ADD person. We like things regimented, thus and so. But when change does come, I am able to take a step back, rely, and, I should do this more because my wife has pointed that out to me. I need to step back and say, hey, what's going on? How, pull people and ask questions. Hey, how can we deal with this? How can we move forward in this? But yeah, it's keeping the faith, surround yourself with people who will hold you accountable, and just accept and embrace the change that comes.
Yeah. What about communication? I think that kind of goes along with that accountability, right? Mm-hmm. You've got to be open and honest and be able to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, but guys, men especially, we are conditioned and trained to say, I got this. I can plow through this. I'm a guy. I got to do this. But that's the lie. That's the great lie.
Yeah, totally.
Men, as much as we are not wired to be in that frame of mind as much as women are great communicators. And sometimes they are, but
yeah, sometimes we're not very good at that.
but my wife is a great communicator. She communicates in ways I can't, and I am striving to keep up with her. But yes, you are right, Sky. It's about communication, being able to be in a place where open, honest communication can thrive. Mm-hmm. And allowing for that to happen, you have to create an environment where it's A, safe, B, it's open and honest, and C, where if you don't come to a consensus, you put it aside and revisit it at a different time with a different perspective.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about the 12-step program, because I went a couple times when I was a bishop, I would go with some of the people that were struggling. And I loved the open communication. And I mean, it's crazy, but I felt the spirit there so strong.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. But the problem, I will say this as a caveat, as great and as inspired as the 12-step program is, and it isn't an inspired program. What I found and why I don't attend them anymore is because too many people use it as a crutch. They used it as a crutch. They would always talk about the problem, never the solutions. Mm-hmm. And I got to a point where I was like, guys, and we are not supposed to cross talk or anything like that, but I broke a cardinal rule because I felt like it needed to happen. I said, fellas, if we do not talk about the solutions, we are always going to talk about the problems and we will never progress. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the solution. And I think that's a part of the communication that needs to happen is, what are the solutions? And let's find the solution and let's move forward. Not focus on the problem.
I really
does need to be addressed.
Yeah, I really love that because when I in a little bit different situation, it wasn't the 12-step program, but after I lost my brother, I went to a grief group. And at first it was just really overwhelming, and it was so hard for me to talk about what happened. And then it kind of got to the point where like, okay, like I was getting a little more used to it, and then I can talk about it. And it did get to that point, like you said, where it felt like, well, I don't want to keep talking about it. I want to know, how do I move forward? Like I can't change anything that happened. So what do I do next? And I actually got really mad. I got really mad. So I tried to change everything in grief group. And I'm like, no, we need to have all these solutions and we need to do this. And then I realized probably about a year after I had tried to like get in there and make everything perfect, was that grief group was the first step, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was the first thing. It was, I needed that to get to the point where I was tired of reliving the trauma. And then I could go and I could go find the resources for the next step and the next step and the next step. And I think that's the way that Heavenly Father works with us, right? Like he really does give us that, milk before meat type of thing, right? When we're ready, he will keep introducing the little things, the little things, the little things. He's not going to ask us to go change everything all at once in this big, huge, grand gesture. Oftentimes it's going to be like, hey, let's first start here, right? Like, let's just go to church. Even if you have your addictions that you're struggling with and you have a horrible relationship that you're trying to keep secret right now, and you're not the type of person that you're portraying to everyone else, let's just go to church. Right? Like, let's just go. And then later on, it can be something else, and to where even now, you have therapy and stuff, but you're going out and you're seeking those other books, right? You're still looking to educate yourself and to learn and to grow. And so I totally agree with you that yes, it can be so frustrating sometimes going to those meetings because we just want the solution, but there is something, I think, magical that happens because of the way that we're designed, where sometimes we need to start little, even if it feels like it's not really doing much at all, because it gives us that place to be open. It gives us, like Scott was saying, he felt the Spirit there. And so like, maybe that's the place where the people feel the Spirit more than when they're sitting in sacrament meeting or something, because they're constantly in their head thinking about how everybody else is going to know. Right. So I totally agree with you. I agree with you. It is so frustrating being in that situation, but also I think it's a really vital step for a lot of people to, to be open to, whether it's 12-step or grief group or just talking to your bishop or admitting that you have a problem to, like what you were saying, one of your friends or family members, someone who's going to keep you accountable. I think for sure, the best thing that I've ever done was to vocalize what it is that I needed to change. Like you start with that and then you keep trying to figure it out. And it is exhausting. I try everything. I mean, my husband, he's just like, yeah, you're going to do that. Okay. Well, have fun. have fun with that type of therapy. Have fun with that type of work. Have fun, but that's what we're here for, right? To learn, to grow,
just
to
a work in progress, Alicia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I got a lot.
Continual work in progress. Well, Morgan, I appreciate you sharing your story with us. It takes a lot of courage, honestly, to get on a podcast and talk about addiction. But I think that it is, it not only can it help you as a person to be able to share your story publicly, I think that helps you, but also like it gives other people hope and courage that if they're going through something like this, they can get through it. Mm-hmm. And that's a big deal. And so I appreciate you having the courage to do it.
I agree.
Well,
is there any final thoughts you might have?
Well, I was just going to say that, I figured that, I'll be honest, I was nervous to even do this, but I felt like I needed to do this because I know that there are many people who are and have been in my situation who don't know how to vocalize, like you were saying, Alicia, how to vocalize the frustrations that they have. And so I understand that this is going to be out in the world now and anybody can find it and all that. But I guess the big takeaway that I want people to take away, not just from my story, is that no matter what happens in life, no matter how bad you think you are off, God will always provide a way for you to come out on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, we are engraven upon the palms of our Savior. He took every lash, every beating, everything for us. And I tremble to think that while he was in the garden, how many drops of blood were spilled on my account. That's something that I can't even begin to fathom. But I am nonetheless very thankful that he decided to take on that challenge and to give me the opportunity, and all of us, to give us that opportunity to be able to be okay with who we are, and ultimately recognize that we are his greatest creation. Of all the creations, we are his greatest. And that should give us comfort.
I agree. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Morgan. I think that was beautifully said. And I think that's like the perfect way to end your episode today. I really, really love that. I want to also thank you for coming on here, for sharing your story, and thank all of our listeners for tuning in. Guys, we say it every week. We love hearing these stories. We love providing a platform for light to be shared. We know that truly, like when we say every member of the church has a story to share, we mean it. Every single member of the church, no matter where you are in your testimony, no matter where you are in your personal life or your struggles, your weaknesses, your strengths, whatever it is, we know that there are stories out there that really can do good and be a light to the world. And we really, really, really would love to encourage you to reach out to us and share those stories with us. Find out if you can be a guest on the show. Even if you're nervous, you can do it scared. It's okay. We're not that scary. But we would just really appreciate everyone tuning in and listening. And we're going to ask that you guys do your 5-second missionary work. Please hit that share button. Let's get Morgan's episode out to everyone and see if we can, continue to spread some light.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Morgan, for being on the show. We really appreciate it. And
it was my pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone, again for being on the show. And we will talk to you again next week with another episode. Till then, take care. See you then.
Bye-bye.